This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Lee Harrington, author, educator, instigator, joined us to talk about his book, Traversing Gender, his upcoming 2-day intensive, and how he is shifting his work to address the realities of social distancing.
Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Aisla.
And together we are the hosts of the BiCurean podcast.
BiCurean is our answer to the polarizing culture we live in.
Tired of feeling under siege and looking for ways to get involved? Then come be a part of a different way of thinking.
Everything from politics to geek culture to current events that polarize us as a society, we explore multiple ways of looking at things.
So, you may have still noticed in the news that COVID-19 has not ended. And we had originally scheduled a show with our guest, Lee Harrington, who is an author and speaker that I worked with recording an audiobook actually just a few months ago. And I mean, COVID-19 was in the news, but it certainly wasn't here. And we did, several recording sessions over the course of last year, but we had planned this show to have him on ahead of time. And the entire structure of what we're going to end up talking about is probably going to be a little bit different, although it's interesting to hear. So without further ado, Lee, if you'd like to say some things about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you both for having me on, and thank you to everybody tuning in. My name is Lee Harrington. I am a sexuality educator and author, as well as speaker and performance artist, and one of those people who wears many hats. But as Eric mentioned, I've written a couple of books, including Traversing Gender, Understanding Transgender Realities, and as well as Sacred Kink, The Eightfold Paths of BDSM and Beyond. So I speak on a wide diversity of things when it comes to sexuality, gender, excitement, and I'm so excited to be here.
We're really excited to have you. I know Eric had the chance to work with you, and he shared some of his experience, and then I had the opportunity to read through Traversing Gender. And I was hopeful. I had a couple of questions because I know you're going to do an intensive on that. And I had a question about that.
Well, and let's clarify. So you were going to do an intensive actually here in Denver.
I was.
And so give us the timeline just real quick, because we were actually planning the show to air before that.
Right. So I was supposed to be coming to Denver and teaching this amazing 2-day intensive with the Sexual Health Alliance that was about, and is about actually, but we'll get to that piece, is about sex, gender, orientation, and understanding transgender experience. Because there's a lot of therapists and counselors and medical practitioners and honestly, people in the world at large who want to understand what life is like for trans people and to really have an awareness of what's going on, and to also just have a difference of an awareness for people's gender as compared to what their orientation is, because people get these things confused sometimes because the language can be so tricky. And so I designed this fantastic 2-day experience, and then COVID-19. And I have been getting an opportunity to learn a lot about Zoom and other social media and online meeting platform systems, because that was not my historical skill set. I'm used to doing in-person intensives and conferences and spending time with a microphone in front of a room full of anywhere from 20 people to 300 people, depending on where I'm at. And so I feel like I've been given this really exciting opportunity / challenge of learning about all of these online systems. My partner and I have taken to hosting social gatherings online 1 to 2 times a week to be able to have people have interpersonal interactions, to be able to learn the systems, but also to have human to human contact, right? Because so many people are used to seeing their friends every Tuesday and being able to be out in the world at large and also grocery shop whenever they want to. And that's not our current reality. That's not how things are working. So I'm feeling really excited that the Sexual Health Alliance is teaming up with me to bring this to being an online thing, which the other cool thing about that is it means that people from all over the world are already planning to join us in a way that wasn't going to be possible when I was only going to be in Denver.
Yeah, that there's definitely some, I don't know, positives feels like a unfortunate word to use. silver linings maybe
Yeah.
that seem to be coming out of the enforced quarantining, in that people are learning how to connect in different ways. I've heard repeatedly in news articles or commentaries, social media, folks talking about how while they feel more separated or they don't feel isolated, I'm sure there are people that do. And there's also been a real move towards a connection. I think because we all feel so inundated by people sometimes, we've gotten kind of defensive. And now because we're forced into space, we realize, oh, wait a minute, actually connection is really important. And I hope that lesson continues with us as we move forward.
Oh, I hope so too. My thing that I've been sitting with though in these online interactions is I'm not calling up their name right now. I can include that in the show notes if you'd like. I can send that to you, Eric. But there was a therapist I was reading their work of online about the difference between being at a meeting online and being present with it. The difference between sharing how you're doing and bearing witness to the person in front of you, in this case on a screen, and hearing how they're doing and mirroring back that you heard them.
Mm.
Because our nervous system is used to having mirror neurons going off, that I see you in me, you see me in, you see yourself in me, etc. Like that back and forth flow. And we're not getting that opportunity as much anymore because we're not getting the person across from us changing their body language.
Yeah.
But if you have someone on the phone or you have someone with you who is on the video chat, listening to them and saying, wow, I hear you about that thing you just said, so that another person knows that someone out there cares, that can be life-changing for isolation.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I brought up on the last show when we talked about COVID-19 stuff that my company has been amazing for my day job. I work in the web biz. We have a website development platform, and the web has become the way that everybody's communicating. I'm actually going to be hosting a workshop for our customers in the next week about using Zoom to be able to interact with your whoever your clients are. Everybody from therapists are going to a teledoc system to we actually did this for work kind of as a proof of concept, and because it was just good, and my company is actually being really, really rock star about this. We had an online yoga instructor, and the whole company was able to log in and do it via Zoom. And was it a little weird? Yes. But I mean, overall, like it was very connective. It was interesting to talk to people afterwards. Like, yeah, that was cool. It was weird, but it was cool. And because I'm blessed because my company has been amazing, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like the company that I work for has also done a couple of happy hours, virtual happy hours,
Mm-hmm.
just to let everybody have a chance to hang out.
Though I would caution people who are listening to this podcast to be aware that not everyone carries privilege in the form of having access to the internet. That does not exist everywhere. For people whose only way to be able to apply for a job online was to go to the library once a week and sign up for your half hour of access time, by not having libraries open, we're now cutting people off from their access to job and employment opportunities.
Or even just applying for unemployment benefits.
Exactly. And so when people say all you have to do is hop online, you just have to do this, that just doesn't exist for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I have, so I'm a transgender man. I was assigned female at birth and live my life and have been a man. I've medically transitioned, which means that I've gone through hormone therapy and other medical procedures. And I believe that I carry a lot of privilege in the fact that I have, quote, passing privilege. It means that in the world at large, if you saw me on the street, you'd have no idea that I was transgender. And I also carry a privilege in the form that I'm not incarcerated. And I decided to start being a pen pal with somebody who is in prison, a couple of people who are transgender men in women's prisons, because it's a hard place to be stuck, right? And there's not a good system in the in the prison system for people who are transgender. And one of them is now out. But because he is a felon, or he has a felony on his record, more accurately, because he has a felony on his record, he can't be employed most places. And the only places he can be employed right now are in sanitation. He is being paid minimum wage to pick up all of the things, like to do hospital cleaning and to do grocery store cleaning and whatnot. He's out there making a minimum wage, and we're staying in touch by text message because he doesn't have internet access. And so some of the people that are out there cleaning our, taking care of things on the front line, he's having to work 2 jobs through all of this, all in public, and can't afford the internet.
I don't think I've ever really thought about it that way because the internet seems so ubiquitous, but it's absolutely true that it is not something that everyone has access to. And if I'm being honest, that's what the COVID-19 has really done, is really, really illustrate the disparities.
Oh, yeah.
Like our situation is basically being propped up by minimum wage workers at the grocery store and gas stations, and then doctors that are already overtaxed, and I mean it's just so many different things. And the people, of course, that are suffering are mostly the minimum wage people, and mostly the people that are in service industries and retail where they're never getting paid that much to begin with. I've said it before and I will say it again now. I think it's a reckoning a little bit about how what privilege actually looks like in every aspect.
Oh, so the first thing that got closed in Austin, I live in Austin, Texas. And the first thing that got closed was South by Southwest, which is one of the largest music festivals in the world, music and technology. And at that time, people in Austin started freaking out because over half of the income for some music performers, for some venues, for some restaurants is made in the 2 weeks of that time period, right? Their nest egg for between now and Halloween, because in the middle it gets to 115 degrees here, right? Nobody's going out to music venues. That people make that money, and everybody was like, well, what's going to happen? What's the number of businesses we're going to lose in August? And at that time, a project got started in Austin of raising funds for performance artists, right? An online fund for performance artists to be able to apply for who were going to not be able to perform in South by Southwest. And I'm finding it so inspirational seeing online all of these different funds that are hopping up to be able to have people who do have income stability, people who are able to work their day job from home, people who are being able to be paid by their job when they can't go in, right? There's a CEO of one of the steak chains,
Texas
the
Roadhouse.
steakhouse.
He gave up
Roadhouse.
his salary to help his worker. I was so impressed.
And to me, that's the kind of stuff we should be doing. And so I love seeing all of these. If you see someone pop up a fund that is something that you believe in, right? Funds for being able to support contract workers of different sorts, funds for supporting sex workers who can't be able to make money, funds for people who are not able to apply for unemployment because they do contract work of some sort.
Yep.
I love seeing these pop up, and I encourage everyone, listen, if you see any that you would support at all, and you can even give $5, it makes a difference to those of us who are contract workers.
I completely agree with you. And another thing that I've been doing that I recommend doing in addition to all of that, I've been getting takeout from my favorite restaurants. If for no other reason than I'd like to see them still open by the time this all passes. Those people are in there trying to make it work in a tough situation, as with so many other people. But there's a lot of ways that you can actually help, especially if you are in a place of privilege of having a job right now and being able to get income. If you value the performers and these services and restaurants in your area, you can help them.
Well, and one of the other things I'm loving in my alternative sexuality communities is there was a skill set that was built up in the AIDS movement that's being brought back, which is, are you a person who has no immune issues? Building entire Facebook groups on if you are someone with immune issues or can't go out because you're an elder or have disabilities or whatever it is, It's people literally stepping up and saying, I would rather risk my health going to the grocery store for you, getting supplies for you, helping you barter a mile away from each other to have yeast to make your bread.
Yeah.
I will be the one who does the runaround for you because I have health and wellness and you don't, which was something that came up back in the 80s for HIV positive men, the number of women and lesbians that popped up and said, I will volunteer myself because you are sick and dying, and the US government isn't doing anything about it. Here's how I will do this. And to see that skill coming back in the LGBT communities and the kink community and all of that, to me is so inspirational. And I would love to see more of that happening too.
Yeah, it's interesting to me coming from a queer community background and being in more of a straight world, the ways in which the straight community to a certain extent doesn't get it. When I bring those values in of that like mutual benefit, it's almost that sort of like it's almost like people take it as you perceive them as not able to, rather than understanding it's just a different kind of community value. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I've run into it a few times, having lived in a primarily like lesbian and queer community. And even though we weren't dealing with AIDS, I feel like that value is still very much a part of how we engaged in our behaviors. And then, more than once, not being in that community and sort of assuming that's kind of like we pull together. The reactions that I get around it are often surprising to me because it's just not, where I come from. And then the other thing that was interesting to me was I was talking to a friend of mine about how so many of the folks I know are like alt sex in some way, like poly or kinky or queer. And they've all taken this very seriously, like very seriously. And I was just like, oh, I wonder if it's because we're used to these conversations about consent and sexual health. And so when this came out and they were talking about, mitigation, I was like, or not mitigation, but the containment, because I was like, wow, it's really interesting to me that there's this larger group that isn't taking it seriously, or it seems like they're still congregating. And these groups didn't do that as much, in my experience. I don't know if that's true everywhere.
And I think that's one of the skill sets that various alt-sex communities are bringing to general consciousness right now. Tools around having risk-aware, informed decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And making where we can't get rid of all of our risk factors. That's not real. Right. The only exception I can say to that is I lived in Alaska for 5.5 years, is preppers who have gone completely off the grid and are not talking to anyone. You know what? Good on you. Right. You planned for this ahead of time. But for everyone else, if you're saying I'm going to the grocery store and picking up stuff on the curbside, there's still risk factors in place. So how do we make decisions from a risk-aware place? And I have a group of friends of mine that are polyamorous that live in 3 different households with their kids, and they have made a decision between all of them that what they're doing is that all of those people will get together at any of their different houses, and that together it's 6 adults and 5 children between the 3 households. And they've decided that that's their risk pool, and that the person who has the strongest health, that person who never gets the flu, that woman who never gets sick, she's the one doing the grocery shopping for all 3 households.
Yeah, no, I would totally, that's the way I would see it as being the most beneficial.
Yeah. And I love it when
I've seen that.
Yeah, and I love it when I'm seeing monogamous groups of friends who are having that conscious conversation based on seeing polyamorous folks have the conversation, right? Non-monogamous folks have the conversation. And so seeing that ripple effect out of alternative sexuality and alternative relationship communities into communal consciousness in the world at large, I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, both of you brought up the ideas behind the queer communities and how they have adapted and adjusted, and there's been a camaraderie in it. And I think a lot of ways it's actually going to be very wonderful to have the straight and the more straight edged, communities understand, the straight laced communities understand just what it is like to actually have a community, to actually have to make those tough decisions, like pick the healthy one and send them out, you know, understanding who the vulnerable people in your household are, or in your group of a couple of households or friends or whatever. It's something that was a trial by fire in the AIDS epidemic and onward. And just the way that some communities have isolated, that was by choice and sometimes by necessity of more social pressure. But now that this COVID-19 thing is the great equalizer, it's a unique experience for everyone.
Well, but if we look back to when, because I've had people say, oh, well, this is just like the AIDS crisis, we're pulling this back up. Folks don't have a long enough memory to go back to when AIDS was called GRID, gay-related immune disorder.
Yep.
And that nobody knew how it was being spread. So when somebody got into the hospital, all of their possessions were being burned.
Yeah. Well, and their houses were like hazmat suited. It was, and people were afraid to like talk to gay men. It was terrifying.
Exactly. And so, and on top of that, the US government didn't have a response to it until we started having, honestly, straight white, quote, average Americans starting to get things, right? The response didn't come with people who were gay. The response didn't come with people who were African American who were contracting. It's when it showed up with white people in a copy of Time magazine. That's when we started getting change from the US government. And so I have an emotional struggle when I see people make that direct, connection. We learned these things during the AIDS crisis, absolutely. But when I see people who don't have the longevity of memory use some of these words, I do admit to having a gut response, as it were.
Yeah, I was reading an article about pandemics in general, and what Eric was referring to, I think, around the equalization of this situation is a key factor. It's impossible for people to, I guess not impossible, that's a hopeful statement. It's very difficult for it to be ignored because it is so ubiquitous in its infections. Like, wealthy celebrities like Tom Hanks and athletes and
members of
Congress who are typically either able to avoid or hide if their exposure in a way that prevents people from understanding that it's an illness, not a morality of some sort. And so, yes. And that's what Nita, the one we were talking about that we had on the show, she does inclusion work and has been doing it since the 80s. I should, once again, Dr. Nita Tyler Mosby. And she was saying, one of the big differences is this puts us all in the same boat. And we've said that before. Mm-hmm. We've heard people say we're all in the same boat and we roll our eyes because we know that's not totally accurate. And actually right now that's true. We are all in the same boat.
Doesn't care about your zip code, doesn't care about your paycheck, doesn't care about your profession.
Well, and the people who have access to that level of protection, usually, because there isn't actually a solution, don't have their normal privilege of safety. Yep.
I find it, interesting that members of Congress are scared of getting this because it got right in there. And they're usually the ones guilty of living in the world of this can't possibly happen to me. Right? They kind of laud their privilege over people in ways that they make decisions for people without ever actually being in it. And that's not the case.
As a note, if you're a listener and you're like, oh, it's not, I'm not privileged, etc., I'm going to just offer out the hack that I use, which is I have an advantage. That when I hear the word I carry privilege, I just hack it to I was given an advantage, or I have an advantage because something X, Y, or Z happened that I never asked for in most cases.
I like that.
I offer that because I've had a lot of people, I've been having conversations with folks about, oh, you carry privilege in the fact that you have a house that you have a room that each adult could go to and close the door.
Yeah.
You have private space as compared to, your friend in New York with the
he's lucky he's got a room, but
yeah, he's lucky he's got a room, but that's that many people in one household.
Unrelated to each other.
Right. As compared to people that are homeless and living under bridges, or people who are in shelters, or people who are sharing a studio apartment and there's domestic violence at play. That people were being able to avoid the domestic violence based on being able to leave the house when
Yeah.
things got bad.
Well, you brought that up in our kind of pre-show chat, and I found it intriguing because I admit it's really difficult to fully get my brain around everything, but you're absolutely right. There are some people whose self-defense to their situation is to not be home.
Yeah. And so for me, when I see folks that are usually really talkative online go silent, or I see people who are usually really silent start posting a lot of things that I find potentially concerning, I do direct reach outs. None of these group things of like, how's everyone doing? No, I will pick up my phone and call that person or immediately text them and be, hey, what's going on? And I've sat with, what if one of my friends locally comes out with this, I'm actually in a domestic violence situation right now and I have nowhere to go because I'm stuck in this home. I've already talked with my partner about, I'm willing to have that conversation with the whole household about bringing some stranger in, because we have room under we have room under our roof. There's a couch, right? Compared to people who can't leave their situation. So I think it's another opportunity we have when watching our social media feeds and when we're talking to friends, is to reach out to people directly and to find out whether, could it feel under the surface. And if you're someone at home who is having that happen, consider whether you're open to reaching out, because there might be someone else out there that has a couch. That yes, we're in the middle of pandemic, and yes, you're another person for exposure, but their friendship will offer the choice to bring you in.
I haven't met
not
anybody
feel
who's that
afraid.
paranoid about their friend or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
we've been safe. We've had meetings with our friends and stuff online and talked about how, probably better we don't hang out and stuff, but those aren't life and death situations. So, as with
Well, I say
everything
that
in this, perspective is key.
Well, I'm somebody who's danced with depression in the past. And when I've been in those mindsets, I can imagine my own self-talk. I remember my own self-talk of, I don't want to be an inconvenience. I don't want to harm someone. I don't want to be a problem. It's not that big of a deal. Like those kinds of self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm looking at,
Yeah.
right? If you're somebody who's having that self-talk, I'm a risk factor. No, you're someone who people care about, or you're somebody that, even if you don't have bests of friends, there's probably someone out there, and don't be afraid to voice it. Rather than, there are a lot of places right now where they're already reporting higher percentages of domestic violence. That's already coming in from crisis call centers and from various 911 call centers. And
Yeah.
so, to keep an eye open for people, even if it's a coworker, right? Keep an eye open for your coworkers. Are they, is something going on, and offering out to people? I literally am picking up my phone every day and finding 4 people I haven't texted,
Mm-hmm.
and writing anywhere from 4 to 6 people that I haven't touched base with at all during this thing, and saying, hey, how are you doing? I'm not looking for the American answer, right? Oh, I'm fine. That's the American answer.
Right.
I'm asking for the European answer. Right? What's actually happening for you? I am asking you how you're doing.
Yeah.
Because for me, you were talking before pre-show about the idea of who are you reaching out to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a chance for us to reach out to humans.
It's a chance to connect, and I've really appreciated the ways in which I've also seen communities stepping up. Colorado, which is where where Eric and I are located, there's a really great Facebook group actually that's all about mutual support, and it's about food banks and
There's already been volunteers, like you mentioned, for I'm healthy, I'll run groceries to you if you need it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I see a lot of that showing up, and I just am really impressed with the ways that people are being thoughtful of their neighbors, and there's a lot in that group also on things like addiction counseling. There's lists of, here's all the online resources and groups that you can attend if you need that, and mental health, and some also safety. And it's just, obviously it's a large group, but it's really been amazing to me to see how many people are actually being thoughtful of that. It's not the the minority voice in my observation, which I've been really, and these are people I don't know. I don't even know how I got included in the group, but I immediately was like, this is the group for me. I'm going to participate here. So
I love that.
No, it's great. It's really great.
I'm surprised. I would be surprised if there's not one in Austin.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I know there is. There's actually like 3 different ones. One of them started during South by Southwest, actually, when that first got canceled.
Yeah.
Of restaurants trying to sell the food they'd ordered.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen them even up to and including selling their toilet paper, which is still a thing.
Which is still a thing. Well, because this was before any of the lockdowns, before any of the people going and panic shopping, right? It was folks being like, I can't cancel my order of a flat of salsa.
Right. We're not going to use it now that we don't have.
Can somebody give us wholesale prices?
Yeah.
So that we don't lose our shirt entirely.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the first ones that started. And there's a couple of different groups that have grown since then. So having people look around to see what's out there that they can, do mutual support with. I love that idea.
Yeah. It's interesting. A friend of mine pointed out that, most of the apocalyptic pandemic movies kind of show an immediate disruption in social order. And the majority of what we've seen, I'm not saying it's the only thing that's happening, and yet the majority of what we've seen is people finding creative ways to continue to deliver their services and to participate in social engagement and to support performers. It's been a very beautiful response in many ways. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to expand that aspect as it goes on, because I do think it's going to get harder. And I like that so far being our foundation.
Yeah, I do too.
I wanted to ask, because we're probably going to have to close soon, if you would be willing to talk a little bit about how your intensive will work or how people can participate. We'll obviously put a link to what you're doing in our notes.
And your wonderful books, including the new audiobook coming soon.
But if there's anything you want to share with people about how even to evaluate if it's a good fit for them or...
Absolutely. So with the intensive, I'm going to be looking through and helping people examine the differences between sex, gender, and orientation. The difference between who you are, right? That's your gender, or how you identify, another part of your gender, as compared to who you're attracted to, your orientation. And then breaking down from there the different ways that we can be allies to transgender people, how we can support one another in these times, and how the complexities really can be looked at around these topics. Because a lot of people go, oh, there's people who are male to female and female to male. That's it, right? That's a great place to start. But the world is so much more diverse. And that a lot of the ways that we can help transgender people are ways that we can help everyone. I'll start out with a really easy one that everyone can do. If you are meeting someone for the first time, ask them what name they have. What's their name? If you ask that question of everyone, it seems like an obvious thing, but instead of assuming what someone's name is, you ask them, right? That's something that people already do. What if we add to it, what pronoun do you use? Instead of making assumptions. What's your name? What's your pronoun? And I've had people say, well, I can't change these things. I can't change the name I called someone. I've been calling them William for years. I can't call them Bethany. That's not a thing. I can't do that. They've always been William. Well, when you knew William when they were 6, what did you call them? Well, I called them Billy. And when they were in their 20s, what did you call them? Well, I called them Bill. So you've already changed William's name twice. Mm-hmm. You can do it again.
Well, and also, we have a convention when people get married, they change their name. And no one has any objection to that.
And you might stumble the first time. Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Robertson, right? You might stumble the first time. You might even stumble 2 or 3 times, but you correct yourself and move forward. You don't spend half an hour saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've known you by this name for so many years. I can't do it. It's so hard for me. No, that makes it about you.
Yep.
You say, oh, my bad, and you move forward. And we do that all the time, exactly, with marriage, with people who have grown older, with people who decide to remake themselves because they didn't like the name their parents gave them in general.
Go by their middle name.
people who go by their middle name. Oh my gosh, my former husband, his name was John Adam Jarvie. His father was John Michael Jarvie. His father was John something other Jarvie. And anytime somebody would call, like he would be at the hospital and people would go into the lobby and be like, John, we're looking for John. My husband never looked up. That didn't happen. Right? Because he went by Adam, his middle name.
Yeah.
And so any of these things, we can apply these to people with gender journeys as well. And so I'm going to be looking at a lot of these things and then diving deeper on the Friday afternoon and the Saturday morning, looking at how racism affects these things, how colonization, how sexism affects all of these discussions around gender, and looking at it from a worldwide perspective as well. So there's two different options. You can come to the entire weekend, which is 8 hours on Friday, 8 hours on Saturday, and get some continuing education credits for people who are looking for those when it comes to psychology, therapy, counseling, etc., and sex educators. Or there's an option for Saturday only, where it's going to be 4 hours of how do we become better allies to transgender people, whether it's corporate activism, right? How do you address things in the HR department, to having a kid that comes out as transgender and really supporting them through the process, or you have a parent who comes out, or a friend, or you've just wanted to learn how to be a better ally to people in the world at large. That's a chance for you too on that Saturday alone.
I love it. I'm glad you're able to get it going in some way at all. Again, with so many things getting canceled and just everything being disrupted, I think the key to survival, real honest survival right now, is adaptability. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll post the information up for that, and love to check back in with you as this all continues, and maybe even for other conversations not as COVID-19 related. So if you're down to come back, we'll definitely have you. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. And if folks want to stay in touch with me online, my website is passionandsoul.com. And if you type in Lee Harrington on the internet, you either find me or a lovely woman who wrote Rex in the City, a complete dog walking guide. I am not her. But Passion and Soul almost anywhere on the internet. I'm hosting free discussions on a variety of topics during COVID-19, so you can come in and dial in for those conversations on all kinds of things. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks.
Explores the secrets and strangeness of small towns across the globe. They may be local legends, paranormal, true crime, or just plain weird. Join me every other week as I tell you stories of these small towns, as well as local headlines and listener stories. Get it wherever you get your podcast. For more info, check out stscast.com. Every town has a secret. What is yours?
So, welcome to our BiCurean moment for this episode.
So mine is, it's both fun and serious. A friend of mine sent me this. It was a question on, I'm going to say it hopefully correctly, Quora, I don't know if you know that online.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you did. The question the person asked was, as a left-leaning person, what do you like about conservatives?
Huh.
And I really thought it was a great question. And this person, one of the people who answered, talked about some different things about conservative communities that I also, in my experience of them, have found to be true. And I thought it was a great way to highlight that it's not this either or. We can have some political differences without having to say, "Oh, you're bad," and so I don't want to get into it. I'll post a link to it in the show. But the one thing that I really appreciated that he talked about a lot was, he said, we as liberals will talk about benefiting people and helping people, and yet his experience was that again and again, when he was in a conservative community and someone had a need, people showed up with work and money.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't words. It wasn't, gosh, we should go talk about this. It was, oh, let me bring you groceries. Let me write you a check. And he said, in the left community doesn't do it that way. Usually they're not often personal and just showing up and getting in there. And that has been my experience as well of the conservative communities that I've known. And so there's a lot to appreciate. And I just kind of like, and a conservative friend of mine sent it to me. We still talk about a lot of things. That was kind of fun too. So I'll share that, but it's just a moment of happiness.
Seems like they're few and far between, but yeah, it does sound fascinating. Definitely check that out myself. I think some that actually had come up for me while we were recording the show earlier was an idea of perspective, which is to say that let's not lose sight of the fact that, you know, whether it's COVID-19 and your area is heavily impacted right now or lightly impacted, that, you know, the things that are coming down and that are being done so that your city that's not heavily infected right now does not become the next one on the news that they're talking about as having an outrageous number of cases. So just keep in mind that, you know, we all live in different parts of the country. We all have different experiences, different cultures and subcultures in the cities that we live in. But in a lot of ways, the perspective that we should have is one of the global community. You know, be thankful if it's not as bad near you, instead of being annoyed that you're having certain things prevented, you know, access to and things like that. It's just key to understand what this is like for other people, even if it's not you.
Well, and when you said perspective, you also made me think of some comments that I've seen people making around, you know, like our great-grandparents had to give up, you know, money and metal and go fight in trenches. And all we're being asked to do is stay home. That's literally all we're being asked to do.
Yeah. And I know that it's hard. It's been very hard on a lot of people. But, you know, I keep seeing news stories about people that are shirking some of the things that they've been told, and they're not socially isolating, or they're trying to do certain things, not even business related. I mean, I can even see some justification if you are struggling to want to keep your business open, maybe you're pushing it a little bit. But really just understand that we're all in this together. And if you're sick, it's not about you being sick. Sometimes in a lot of these cases, it's about how you might affect other people. And that's a key thing there. So the perspective should be stay home, stay safe, don't get sick. And in doing so, you're preventing your loved ones and other people, strangers, from being sick as well.
Yeah.
So on that note, we would like to say,
Thanks for listening. If you have ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are BiCurean on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can email us at podcast@BiCurean.com.
and if you like what we're doing, please tell your friends about us and share the episodes you find most interesting.
Thank you.